So this will be a shorthand but comprehensive look into how to set up an aquarium. So you've decided to get into the hobby. That's a very good choice because fish are an awesome pet. They're very beautiful. You're bringing essentially a small piece of nature into your living room or bedroom. They don't need to be walked. They don't need to be fed that much. They just need heating and water and lighting. And, you know, they are quiet. They don't bark. They are basically almost the ideal pet. There are some drawbacks, but we'll get to that later. So how would you set up an aquarium? The first thing you will need is a very sturdy stand or table. Now, I say that because water is a very heavy substance. 1 liter of water, that's about 3 gallons, I believe, actually weighs 1 kilogram. So 1 kilogram is just basically would cover a very tiny bit of this aquarium. This is 120 liters, and when it's almost full, when at that stage you will have fish in it as well and other decorations. But that aquarium, which is 120 liters, will weigh close to 120 kilos. That is a full-grown human male. That is quite a lot of weight, so you will need a very sturdy stand. You can buy purpose-built aquarium stands, which are expensive, but they will hold the weight for sure. They're also laminated. They don't suffer from water damage if you spill some water on it, which you eventually will. But even if you use a second-hand table such as this one, you should make sure it can hold the weight. If you spill some water on it, it won't damage it, and it won't rot the wood away when it gets wet. So keep that in mind and get a very sturdy, water-resistant table or stand. A second-hand kitchen table would work perfectly. Now, the second thing people forget is that because of this huge weight that the water exerts on the aquarium, especially on the bottom of the aquarium, because all of the water is pushing down on this as well as this, but more so on the bottom. If you put the aquarium just flat on the table, because of the weight pushing down on the middle of the bottom pane, what you tend to get is the glass sags because the no table is perfectly level, perfectly flat. So the seals on the side, the silicone glue would detach from the sides. You will get leakage in the middle, and also you might have a cracked bottom pane at some stage. That might ruin the table. It will definitely ruin your aquarium. You'll get leakages. It might ruin the floor or it might actually flood the room. And you might kill all your fish because you leave one morning, it cracks during the day, and the water level is down to the minimum or it's completely empty, and you've killed all your fish. So keep in mind that you can't just put the aquarium straight on the stand. So what you would put in between the aquarium and the stand is this, a piece of dense but thin layer of foam. This is called Polyfoam, and this actually evens out the surface of the table and the bottom of the aquarium. It is very handy, quite cheap, and this is essential to even out the surface, so you won't have the glass bottom of the aquarium sag, and it won't crack, it won't break, you won't lose water and your fish. So once you've put that between the aquarium and the stand, what you will need is an aquarium, obviously. You can buy it straight from the shop. The larger the aquarium, the easier it is to keep water quality and pH levels and all of the essential parameters that you need to keep your fish alive at a standard level. So what I would advise is not get a small aquarium as a first-time fish keeper, actually go bigger. Not huge, because then you will have other problems, but say 30 gallons, about 110 liters, up to 200 liters is actually a very good choice. This is 120 liters. This is good for guppies, for platies, all sorts of beautiful light bearers, even for some guppies. So this is a good size to start with. You can buy the aquarium new from a shop. It will cost more than, say, a second-hand aquarium, such as this one. This cost me a quarter of the price that it would have cost me completely new. So that's why I bought this second-hand. Obviously, I need to clean it because it's got a lime scale on it. You can lift the lime scale with vinegar, which is more organic. It's not a strong acid, so it is preferable in an aquarium, but it's not as efficient as hydrochloric acid, which a 20% hydrochloric acid will actually remove all that lime scale very easily. You'll have a clean aquarium. You will need to rinse it, clean it after you've used this on it. Wear gloves because this is quite corrosive. But after that, you're good to go and you have cleaned your aquarium from lime scale. It looks perfectly pristine. It's as good as you. Now, what you need on the aquarium itself is a top. To have a top is essential, in my opinion, because fish tend to jump certain species more than others. But for example, rainbow fish are notorious for jumping out of the aquarium. So you should keep in mind that these streamlined, very quick swimming fish need a top so they don't jump out of the aquarium. You basically have three types of tops. You have aluminum, which is quite expensive, but they are quite good and long-lasting. You have plastic tops, which are cheaper, but I don't quite like them as much because they're quite bulky, heavy to lift up, or actually difficult to lift up. They spill water everywhere. So what I like to use is actually, you can put this on at home if you bought the aquarium without it, is just glue a piece of glass in the middle of the aquarium across it, put two rails on the side, sliding rails made of plastic on either side of the hole that you've created, and then you have two smaller pieces, smaller panes of glass in between over here. You can slide and you have access to each and every corner of the aquarium. It is see-through, you can put a lamp over it easier. I just prefer this version. Obviously you will need a little corner cut off from one pane to let the cables and everything else out for the appliance inside. So that is that about the top. Obviously, you will need lighting inside. You can put the lighting on the outside if you have a glass top. You can put, or actually you have in the plastic and aluminum ones, you have light tubes or LED lighting inside of it, which is very efficient and it's also quite handy. But also a top doesn't let the buildup of ammonia and all sorts of algae will cause the water to not have a pleasant smell after a certain time. Also, if you don't have a top, the water will evaporate quicker. The air temperature between the water and the cover is usually kept constant. It's a bit warmer. So if you have fish that breathe from the actual air above the water, such as guppies, which can breathe atmospheric air, it is better for them because they're breathing in moist and warm water, warm air. So I would advise that you keep your aquarium covered and to have the lighting separate. The next thing that you need is, for some species, you don't need to heat the water, but for others, such as tropical fish, all your guppies, all your angelfish, all of the beautiful tropical fish, you will need to heat your water. So what you need is a heater. A heater is basically a quartz or glass tube that you have a coil inside. It's like any electric heater. It heats up, the heat goes through the quartz tube. You need to put this below the water level so that it is in the water, this part up until the top of the cord, so no part of it is hanging out. On the better ones, you actually can set the temperature that you want to heat it. It has a little lamp that shows when it's on. And and it is a very handy way to actually tell when you're heating the water. It is preferable to buy an energy efficient one because this one is 150 watts for an aquarium that is from 90 to 150 liters. You will need to look at how much water it can actually heat, because for a larger aquarium you will need larger wattages for the heater. Otherwise, one corner of the aquarium will have warmer water, the other one will have colder water, and that might actually make your fish sick. So you will need one that is big enough for your aquarium, but it usually says on the side of the box that you buy it in how much water this can actually heat up. And it's preferable to buy a energy efficient one, because this 150 watts is basically like leaving a very, very bright light on, very, very bright halogen bulb on throughout the day. So that is quite important to look for an energy efficient one. Now, so that you know how much you're heating the water, you will need a thermometer. Now, you can have the digital one, you can have the old analog one that uses alcohol or some painted chemical. They don't use ones that are filled with mercury anymore, as far as I know, at least in Europe they don't. I just like the look of this. Obviously it's made of glass, so it breaks easy, so it's not preferable for a kid's aquarium, but it's more reliable, definitely doesn't suffer from electric problems, and other than it breaking, you will have no problems with an analog old school thermometer, and also they're quite cheap. Now, after you've heated your water, you will also need to treat your water so that it doesn't get dirty. All the fish waste, all the small bits that fall into the water will need to be cleaned, and this is probably the most important part of the aquarium is a filtration system. You can have filters that are going inside the tank. This would have a small suction cup so that it would attach here on the glass, and this pulls the water through a sponge that gets all the debris out, also bacteria that help with the nitrogen cycle, that break down the ammonia, the fish waste, and the ammonia that the fish's bodies produce. All of those bacteria inside will break that down. What you do need to keep in mind is that you should look for a filter that is large enough and high capacity enough for your aquarium. A good, properly sized filter will actually will actually circle the entire aquarium 4 times in an hour. So this is 120 liters, times that by 4, that's how much water your filter needs to circulate in 1 hour. So that the whole aquarium's water will actually get turned over once an hour. 3 times an hour. So that is very important. You can have, I basically differentiate between 3 types. There's an internal filter that works only within the aquarium. No parts will be sticking out. You put this underneath the water, it's quiet, and it just cleans the water while it's inside. You can also have ones, but you need to keep the top open for that, which you attach on the side over here. It pulls the water up and into this little, which looks like a box, and the water actually spills the little bits of this filter, this filtration system, and it actually goes back into the aquarium. They're also quiet, but they're not as high capacity, and you will struggle to find one that is big enough for an aquarium over 120, 150 liters. So those are for smaller aquariums. And then you have filter systems that are completely outside. They are a large box. You set it down on the ground outside of the aquarium or underneath, and they actually, for large aquariums, these filtration systems work the best. because they are outside. They tend to be a little more quiet, and also they are the highest capacities for a large aquarium over 250, 300 liters. Those are preferable, but they do consume a bit more power, but they work the best, in my opinion. So after you've heated and filtered your water, what you would need is a UV filter to actually get rid of the algae. Many people neglect this, but since the technology is available and not that expensive, I would advise everyone to have a UV filter. Algae is a big, big problem. Obviously, you need to set your aquarium in a shady part of the room where no or very little natural light actually hits it, because it will cause an algae bloom. Also, fish are used to having light hitting them from the top, so having sunlight from the side in the morning or in the evening from the side hitting them might not be the best for them and confuse them. So obviously you have your lighting, you have that on for 10 to 12 hours a day, but that lighting will cause some algae to grow. Now, algae is an essential part of the aquarium in small quantities because it does produce oxygen. Things like snails, algae eaters, which I'll talk about later, actually feed on it. It is an inevitable and essential part of the aquarium, but you will need to control it. So what I would advise you do, they have UV LED bulbs, which are very small, very efficient. You can put it on the little nozzle of your filter, and it actually, as the water is being cycled, the UV light from these little LED bulbs kills all the bacteria and all the cyanobacteria and all the algae, and keeps your aquarium water very, very clean. So that is, I would say, an essential thing to have. They're not that expensive, so you should invest in one. Then, what you would also need, especially if your fish can't breathe atmospheric air, such as gouramis do, you would need an aerator, a air pump. So what you need for that is this little fella here. This is a Tetra. These are very quiet, very good air pumps. What you would do is set this out on the table, attach a tube with a air stone at the end of it, put the air stone in the water. The air pump will push air through this little tube. It excuse me. It pushes the air through the air stone. Little bubbles come up from the air stone, and that actually makes absorbs oxygen inside or into the water, and therefore your fish can pass that oxygenated water through their gills and not drown or not die of lack of oxygen. You should invest in these if you have fish that can't breathe atmospheric oxygen. Also, in my opinion, the little bubbles of air coming up through the aquarium look quite pleasing. And also, you should look for an air pump that is large enough for your aquarium. These are usually specified on the side of the box that they are being sold in. So you should look for one that is appropriate for the size that your aquarium is. Now, substrate is the next thing. I won't demonstrate this here, but substrate, I would use soil from the garden if you have a garden, or organic potting soil to lay it down on the bottom. This will be good because that soil carries nutrients and all sorts of other chemicals that the plants, if you want to plant the aquarium, will use up. Also, some fish like it. Certain more acidic soils will actually help with the pH of your water if you have hard water in the area that you're living in. So putting down a small or a thin layer of soil on the bottom of the aquarium is preferable. Also, you should boil this water in a pot to get rid of microorganisms, algae, all sorts of bacteria that live in the water that might otherwise poison your fish. Once you've boiled it, you can lay it down, let it settle, plant your plants in it, which will also help keep your water clean, and also plants will provide a suitable hiding place for your fish. And on top of that, once you've planted your plants into the earth, the dirt that you've boiled and laid down, you would put either sand or a small layer of gravel or smaller decorative stones that look very good, and they keep the plants firmly on the bottom. So that's another thing to keep in mind, so that your plants don't just randomly float up to the top. So that's substrate. Then you would add your water. You might need to treat your water if it's not rainwater that you're using or distilled water. Water from the taps usually contains chlorine. It is usually hard, which means it has quite a lot of calcium and magnesium ions dissolved in it. So you will need to treat that. You will need to add certain chemicals to lower the pH and make it suitable for the fish. All fish, you can look this up on the internet. You have awesome books that you can look this up in, such as this Back to Nature book, which tells you all about the fish and their temperature and pH requirements, the water quality that they need to have. And from that, once you've added the water, you should let all the substrate settle, circle the water, cycle the water, and add some bacteria culture, which you can also buy. These bacteria are nitrifying bacteria. They basically break down the ammonia that your fish and the fish waste actually put into the water. They're an essential part. That's why people tell you that once you've set up your aquarium, you should wait at least 2 weeks, preferably a month, until you add your first fish, because that's when bacteria have actually multiplied enough times so that they have set up a suitable environment for your aquarium. Then what you would add after that, the substrate and the plants, you would add your fish after you've had the natural cycle through once. Now, I will move over to an aquarium that I finished earlier and that I have had for a bit of time now to actually demonstrate how I would stock my aquarium. So obviously you would stock your aquarium according to what species you've looked up, what species you've set it up for, what species water requirements you set it up for. But you should always keep in mind that it is preferable to have 4 kinds of fish, or fish that eat and live in 4 different parts of the aquarium. One would be algae eaters. Now, algae eaters, you can have many, such as common plecos, such as these little fellas, that consume all the algae from the glass and the plants, because algae will grow in your aquarium no matter what you do, but these are very efficient in cleaning the inside of your aquarium. Also, they are, other than keeping the plants clean, they also keep the bottom relatively clean. The second kind of fish you would have is such as these corridoras, these little catfish. They are bottom dwellers. Now, bottom dwellers are very important because when you feed your fish, the fish food will inevitably fall on the bottom. Now, once it falls on the bottom of the aquarium, not many fish actually go down there and eat all of that wasted food. So what you would do is put these bottom dwellers in. They would go around the bottom of the aquarium, eat all the food that you wasted and that fell down on the bottom, and they would clear the water and the aquarium's bottom and keep the aquarium clean as well. The second, actually the third group of fish is fish that swim in the bottom to middle section of the aquarium, such as the guppies and the rainbow fish. They're very beautiful, and also they might eat some wasted food. They occupy that strata of the aquarium, and they won't bother the fourth group, the fish that live on the top to middle section of the aquarium, where you would preferably add fish that feed from the top. So when you have food floating around on the top section of the aquarium, they will eat that and they will keep the actual aquarium clean and pristine. So that is how I would set up a simple aquarium. I've had quite a bit of success with setting up aquariums this way. You should always keep in mind that doing your research, looking stuff up on the internet, in books, is very, very, very important. And you shouldn't add fish. You shouldn't have problems with adding fish or making fish sick by having the wrong temperature, by having the wrong species together and one hurting the other. So you should always do your research, but if you follow this guide and the general points I've laid out, then I don't think you should have any major problems down the line with making a successful and very beautiful aquarium. So thank you for watching.